Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Tony Sirianni podcast. I am thrilled to have my good friend Alex David from Stifel Independent Advisors with us today, the CEO of Stifel Independent Advisors. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Tony. Always love being here. I appreciate the work that you do. I love these podcasts.
Oh, great. I appreciate that too. So it's been a busy year, right? And we're right here in June, sort of the middle of 2023. And the first half of the year, has been slow, right? Sometimes with recruiting, but it also seems to have sort of picked up a fair amount of steam. But we've had a fair amount of headwinds. How are you guys? How are your guys, dealing with it?
Yeah, what's interesting is it feels like I've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
Every quarter or every few months or so, for us in the industry, there's folks aren't really moving, there's less transitions, and it's like, well, what are the reasons why? And it tends to be a different set of reasons, but it's the same behavior. And so,
we also have a different set of like unprecedented reasons. There's a pandemic, now there's a bank failures, it's just like unprecedented stuff.
Yeah, exactly. We have all these, storied examples in previous years or previous quarters, and then it pops back up again. It's the troughs, the peaks, the troughs, the peaks. And to your point though, when we had the unprecedented uninsured bank deposits, and the advisors were kind of sitting in the audience, watching the volley go back and forth, what's going to happen, and folks kind of get stuck, if you will, even though, their own careers may say, hey, you really need to really be thinking about moving to another shop or going independent, but they just kind of get stuck there. And what's interesting, one of my colleagues, he's my CEO, Tim Boostrom, he has these great examples. He gave me this one example, and I thought this was wonderful. And it's almost as if, advisors, they often start projecting of what their clients may be feeling and thinking, like, oh my God, no one will come with me because we have so much market malaise and turmoil and the bank issue and recession and inflation, and they go on and on and on. They can't get out of their own heads. And so so they begin to say, are my clients going to come with me when I transition over? And so he has this one example. He says it's almost as if the client is a patient who has just recovered from a long-term, very serious illness. And this doctor is the advisor. And so if the doctor moves from one hospital A to hospital B, that client is saying, this person saved my life. They have me on this trajectory of getting better. I am never leaving him or her. And it's the same thing with advisors. And sometimes we have to remind advisors, that's how it is. That's how your clients will always leave with you.
Well, I think that's it. I mean, and that's, you and I have been doing this for a long time. So over, 30 years, that's what I have found to be true. If you're a good advisor, your clients are going to want to, be with you. And the same holds true. If you're a nice advisor, you have nice clients. If you're a jerk, you have idiot clients. And that's
exactly
the last person you want to bring to your firm is somebody who's a pain in the ass while you're talking to them, because it's just going to be terrible on the other end. But we've, look, I've been on both sides of this thing and trying to figure out, what's the legs on this move to independence. And look, I think we're 4.5 innings, maybe 5 innings. I mean, there's a lot more to go. In other words, this obviously when you see people continue to move, which they are now, we can get to that, where we are today, where you see them continue to move. I think they have to absorb all these things that are going on, get some lessons out of it. I mean, we haven't had this bank thing in a while, so they see where it is, see where the clients are, get the lay of the land, and then continue to move forward. And that makes me believe that when people, are doing these moves now, especially if you're going, in an independent space where maybe it's not just for checks, right? That they're doing it for, larger reasons. That they have, there's a sort of a belief system, that they're like, I'm not being well served here. I have concerns about the future, things like succession, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously people worry about bringing their clients, but I look at that almost more as competency of the firm that they're going to. They need to have confidence that you guys know how to move clients.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I think that there continues to be this long momentum going toward independent. I really do. But you still see, really well-run firms like I would say, Stifel on the other side of Stifel, they continue to attract really high-quality advisors.
I would say, no, I think when I look at it is everybody's independence has won a battle, right? So you got a guy like Ron, who runs Stifel, they won a battle that talked about transparency and the primacy of the advisor-client relationship and how, an advisor owns their own book. And I see Ron sitting there going, oh, where you been? We've been here. We've had this for 30 years. I mean, we've always done this. So I think there are a bunch of firms now in the middle, and then independence is sort of, if you accept that sort of ethos, right, then you're in the middle there. And you can be Stifel, it can be Stifel independent, it could be, another independent firm, or, just a straight out RIA. So we all accept this group of things. And that's, I kind of think, makes your offering very interesting, because if we do say, and I think it's reasonable to say that there are firms like Stifel, Janney, whoever, that are in that middle ground and not necessarily independent, but they have the same, then it becomes, and then it becomes for advisors, what kind of ice cream do you want? What best suits your, what you want to do?
Your lifestyle, for instance.
You're right. And when you get to that point, then you got to start to compare apples and oranges on the narrower choice of I want independence. And I think that's where it would be interesting to hear from you, right? Because you have the backing of Stifel, which we've already said is kind of in that middle, but you also have the independent option.
Yeah. And for us, we've been very fortunate because, at the end of the day, Ron Kashevsky, who really, really well, Ron has built this incredible franchise. And so the advisors that we brought on board since I've come, I mean, we've literally doubled the business already. These advisors are saying, hey, what they have over there, we want that. Like, yes, we want the culture. Oh, and by the way, I didn't realize that Stifel was the #1 municipal underwriter in the country. I didn't realize that we're one of the largest research firms in the world. And they're like, we want that over there. We want access to that over there.
That's interesting, because typically when you go to independent, you're not getting anything like that.
Yeah,
you're not getting that. I would call that an ecosystem, right? You're not getting anything remotely close to that ecosystem.
Well, that Tony, you just hit on one of our most important value propositions, which is you get this really well-conditioned, high-end white shoe, white glove, kind of like first-class product and services platform, world-renowned platform. Oh, but by the way, you're independent. And, fortunate for us, I would say it just isn't that out there, because a lot of these wirehouse firms or the advisors, they're like, I'd love to go independent, but boy, I've got to leave the fact that, we have access to bank and equity and structure and all these other things. And now I've got to go build it, or I've got to go find it, and we're like, no, we're here. We got that all for you here. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, and I think that is. The two things when you look at research for advisors at wirehouses, what they're afraid of, and by the way, what they've been conditioned to be afraid of, is A, what you just mentioned, products and services, and B, the technology. So if you leave, you're gonna lose that.
You're gonna take back. You can take a step back.
There's a diminution in both.
Yeah.
But with what you're building with your network, you don't have that. There really is.
Well, you hit it right on. We say you have access to three things. First of all, you have access to all the things we just mentioned, but then you have access to, we're trying to create, I've mentioned to you this before, we're trying to create this boutique within a boutique. And so when I sit down with advisors, believe it or not, Tony, all out of our practices, all of our business owners, they have my personal mobile number. I'm like, okay, my siblings have my mobile number, my family has my mobile number, and now you have it's access to senior executives, access to the platform, and then last but not least is access to kind of like a bespoke way of growing, because the advisors that we're talking to, Tony, they clearly have found their way to grow. I can't teach them how to grow.
What's the typical?
That's already.
what's a typical advisor? They're relatively large, right? The ones that we've written
Yeah,
about.
yeah. Typically, they'll have $100 million in assets under management. They're typically coming from the usual, wirehouse firms, but I will tell you that a number of them have been coming from the indie platform, it was a welcome surprise for us.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. Again, based on what we just said, which is if I'm sitting there indie and I want to compete, let's face it, a big firm, a regional firm like Stifel or a big wire, there's a lot of bells and whistles.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
come with it, and I think it's sometimes hard to compete.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, that's
or it's a hassle. You got to put so much. You got to find it all you gotta put it all together, and that's not for everybody.
It's funny. Again, my colleague Tim, he used this illustration. You have the option to go from this luxury apartment in Manhattan to go and buy 100 acres. And you can do anything you want, but you got to do your plumbing, your electricity, your sewage. You got to do everything. And that's like the full, at least that's how we see it in our mind. That's the full RA. You got to do it all. But then you're like, no, I actually want a really, really nice home and a really high-end, cul-de-sac, a really high-end, a gated community. Yeah. That's Stifel Independent Advisors. So you're not renting into your apartment, but you're also not on 100 acres where you can just shoot off your rifle. There are rules.
And also, I imagine that there's, if you find a guy with 80 million that's growing, that's a guy you would want to.
Absolutely. And I tell the team, I said, guys, we're not elitists. I'm little Alex David from Brooklyn, New York. You guys know how I roll.
You and me both.
Yeah. But I said, but if we find someone, even someone who's doing $500,000-$600,000 and they're a star, I mean, they're like, I want to grow. I want to be attached to a firm that's growing. I'd like to be a succession plan. Hey, I'd like to grow in one of these, 2 or 3 different ways that you guys are saying you can help me grow. We'll sign them up, or we'll at least attach them to a firm that's growing.
Well, I mean, that's also interesting. So that's also part of having a larger firm. Look, I've run a couple of these independent firms. It's the succession planning is an important thing, but it's hard to do when you're a smaller firm. It's hard to find because that's becoming more and more of an issue. Where are we going to go? Plus, Alex, how do we train people? Who's training people today? Where are we getting? How are we getting new people in the business?
And honestly, I got to tell you. Another arrow in our quiver is our advisors who are on the independent side. Let's say you want to bring your daughter in, and you're like, hey, I'd love for her to take over my practice, but she needs some training. I mean, I could show her, I can tell her, I can take her.
You need a training program.
I can take her on client visits, but it's not. I need a formal training program. Well, we leverage the formal training program that Ron created on the W-2 side of the business, which I think is a very cool thing.
That's great. No, and I think it's important. Look, we can't. We talk about, hey, we want to bring more people in. You want more diverse people, more this, more. You can't bring anybody in if you can't train them. So that we got to start. We're going to start somewhere.
That's it.
How are you going to do it? It's just one thing to say it, but you throw these people in that have no training, and it doesn't. We know it's hard to do anyway. Yeah. It's hard to do, even if your dad has a book, it's hard to come in and do. Yeah. So you got training is key, and I think that's a differentiator for you guys.
It really is. And so as we're trying to build these flagship offices, $100 million offices with assets under management all around the country, planting a flag in different cities. This flagship, idea is to pour all of our resources into, a practice once they land, from marketing to PR to boots on the ground. And then this added piece is, oh, by the way, if you have your niece or nephew or whomever would like to come into the business and eventually take over your flagship practice, we've got the training program for them as well. It's pretty cool.
I also look at, the fact that you guys have a balance sheet, right? That's strong. I think that's important in the indie side, because look, succession planning and, all those things cost money, right? Because somebody's got to pay to do a succession plan, and not only that, I think there's a broader, just feel this way. You should take equity and look at it in a broader view. A lot of those firms that are independent, we said they're all coming to the middle. They offer equity programs, which is great, but equity also means you own your own book and you can monetize it without having to leave or move. I mean, that's important.
It is important. And to your point, having the expertise of folks in the home office to kind of shepherd you through, kind of be your Sherpa in making that analysis. Not necessarily, I mean, some firms, they have a valuation program. We don't have one in-house, but we have partners that do that. But once you get past that, it's like, okay, now what? I need some advice on how to structure the deal. And oh, by the way, I may need some capital because the guy across the street wants to eventually sell to me and I've got some money down. I don't have it all. Hey, Stifel, can you help out? I know you guys have a large balance sheet. And that's where we come into play as well. And I think, honestly, Tony, sometimes advisors take that for granted that, oh, yeah, everyone has.
That's not everywhere. No. No, it's not. I mean, and people do it. And the other thing is, where's the money coming from? So I think there are people that do it that have pools of money, but when it's coming from a leveraged buyout firm or somebody who's an aggregator and the money's got PB whatever strings attached, then
that comes with terms. and I tell advisors, hey, that's fine, but remember, these firms are not doing this for charity. They're doing this because they see this terrific business model where they can make money. So keep that in mind.
I always say that every time you take money, there are compromises, even in a good way. So when you take money from firms that have a 7-year time horizon to get paid back, you necessarily compromise, right? I mean, you just do.
Yeah.
And versus you guys have been around for, I don't know, 1 million years.
We've been around for 30 years, and Ron's shop has been around for 130 years. So yeah, you're right. You're right.
Right. Well, the other thing is, where do you see? I mean, we believe it or not, we're getting close to over 20 minutes. But where do you see this thing going? So and not just, but you guys as well as just sort of this move to independence in general. I told you I think we're 4.5 innings.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I actually think that because so I would say it this way. A few years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, out of every advisor, maybe 2 advisors went independent. Believe it or not, those were the actual hard fact statistics. Now it's probably 2.5, maybe 3, which means that 7 out of every 10 are still going from employee to employee. And so we are kind of like we're well into the game, but we're far from the 9th inning. That's the first piece. The second piece I will say is, in terms of Stifel independent advisors, we're kind of off to the races. We've doubled our business already. We'll probably double again by the end of 24. We have a great team around us, and we're having a bunch of fun. And Ron, we have all of Ron's support, so we're having a good time.
It's good. Well, see, now I should end on that because that's a high note right there. I think that was a good commercial for you. I just had one more question to follow up with you, get your opinion on. So I'm familiar with that stat. I just feel anecdotally, the stat about the number of advisors, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that versus 10 years ago, versus 5 years ago, the number of advisors who at least give independence a look is much higher. I mean, they're
100%.
I think, 10
As a
years.
matter of fact, I think it's probably 9 or 10 out of 10.
That's what I think. Yeah, that'd be my guess. I think if you have a decent sized book, you got to take a look at it. And it's not for everybody. They're not finding the right thing, or they get the wrong information. Sometimes there's a lot of, or it's just not, some people are better at a wire or wherever. I get it.
Yeah.
But I do think everybody gives it a look. And that's part of what, trying to do these calls is what I'm trying to do, is try to give people options, let them talk, get to see some of these firms, guys like yourself talking, so they get a sense of it, because there's a lot out there. There's lots.
I'll end with this one thought. What I always tell advisors is, you really don't know whether Stifel Independent Advisors is the right firm or not. I mean, I don't know whether you're the right advisor. We don't. And that's why I say, just come out to St. Louis, hang out with us for 24 hours. Immediately, you'll know these guys are clowns. They're not for me, or this is where I belong. Immediately you'll know that.
Awesome. Hey, all right, buddy. It's good to talk to you. We'll do this. We'll do this again. That time goes fast, but
Absolutely.
really good to have you on the show.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Tony.
You got it.